They ridiculed her, defaced her space, and schemed to expel her. But this rookie black teacher transformed their animosity into the most profound lesson they'd ever experience. The sun hadn't fully awakened when Rena Kalishte Brooks eased her Honda into the Meadow Glen Junior High parking lot. A warm cup of chicory coffee warmed her hand, and a folder brimming with fresh lesson plans rested beside her. Her dashboard clock flashed 6 a.m. She exhaled slowly, her gaze fixed on the brick school building, its long windows and a silence that felt less peaceful and more observant. Rena emerged, her heels marking a crisp rhythm on the pavement. She looked sharp in navy slacks and a pale yellow blouse that highlighted the radiance of her brown skin. Her hair, gathered into a soft twist, was the style her grandfather fondly called elegant armor. She hadn't returned to the Midwest since her college days in Cincinnati. Raised in New Orleans, she was accustomed to boisterous greetings and neighborly nods. Yet here in this quiet town near Mansfield, Ohio, people kept their words tucked behind tight smiles. As she stepped through the school's main doors, a faint aroma of lemon floor polish and cafeteria pancakes reached her. A woman at the front desk offered a fleeting glance before returning to her computer. "No, good morning, no welcome." Rena offered a soft, "Hi, I'm Miss Kalishte Brooks, the new 8th grade history teacher." The woman simply gestured towards the staff lounge. Inside, two teachers, mid-conversation over coffee, paused as Rena entered. "She must be the one they hired late," one mumbled. The other, a man with thinning hair and khaki pants, remained silent. Both offered strained smiles, then resumed talking as if she weren't merely 5 feet away. Rena poured her coffee and departed, a quiet presence. Her classroom, room 208, was on the second floor. She'd spent the weekend setting it up. Maps adorned the walls, a Your Voice Matters poster near the whiteboard, and desks arranged in a circle instead of rows. It looked ready, but she no longer felt it. She stood by the door as students shuffled in. Most offered a quick glance before averting their gaze. One tall girl with braces and a skate-or-die hoodie made a face as if she'd smelled something sour. A few boys smirked and whispered, their eyes darting toward her. Then came Brock Delaney. Blonde hair, varsity hoodie, the kind of swagger that suggested his parents were likely fixtures at every school board meeting. Behind him was Tanner Rigsby, shorter, with sharper eyes that seemed to scan for weakness. They entered last, slowly as if they owned the space. "Is this social studies or story time with Oprah?" Brock mumbled, loud enough for half the class to overhear. A few kids chuckled. Rena didn't flinch. She pointed him toward a front row seat. "Let's take our seats and begin with names," she stated. "Tell me yours and one historical figure you'd invite to dinner. Keep it simple." As students went around, tension permeated the air. One girl offered Harriet Tubman. Another boy muttered, "George Washington, I guess." When it was Brock's turn, he leaned back in his chair. "Ben Franklin. I hear he liked the ladies." Laughter. Rena kept her voice composed. "Do you admire that about him or something else?" The class fell silent. Brock raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Tanner, next to him, smirked. "I'd say Andrew Jackson. He didn't care what anyone thought." "That's one way to recall him," Rena replied. Others remember the trail of tears. A few heads turned, even some of the kids who hadn't laughed earlier sat straighter. Rena didn't gloat, she simply moved to the next student. When the bell rang 40 minutes later, no one rushed to say goodbye. They simply filed out, leaving behind a silence thick with unspoken questions and judgment. Rena sat at her desk looking out the window. Her grandfather's words resonated in her mind, "Grace is louder than hate." She wasn't here to win a popularity contest, she was here to teach. But as she watched Brock and Tanner laughing down the hall, she knew this would be a battle of patience, not just knowledge. The second week arrived swiftly. Rena appeared early every day, even when the sky still looked like a dream. She greeted every student by name even when they didn't reciprocate. She penned thoughtful questions on the board, even knowing most wouldn't glance up from their phones. It wasn't the silence that disturbed her. It was the deliberate frigidity, the way certain students maintained eye contact just long enough to signal their intentional disregard. The way Tanner rolled his eyes every time she turned to write on the board. The way Brock made sure to mutter something under his breath every single day, loud enough for the front row to catch, but quiet enough to avoid a detention slip. And then there was the email. It arrived late Wednesday afternoon just as she was packing up. The subject line read, "Regarding Mrs. Kelishte Brooks," and was sent to the entire 8th grade parent group. In the message, someone pretending to be a concerned student complained about her bias, her overly emotional teaching, and even suggested that she made certain students feel unwelcome because of their family values. Rena sat frozen, reading it twice before her stomach churned. The wording was carefully vague but toxic. Her phone buzzed. A message from Mr. Dunkley, the assistant principal. "Let's talk in the morning." Saw the email. No reassurance, no support, just protocol. That night she called her grandfather, Frank Calix, down and gently. He answered on the second ring. "They're testing you, baby girl," he said without waiting for her to explain. "Not because you can't do the job but because they're afraid you'll do it too well." Rena said nothing, she didn't need to. He knew. "Hold your ground," he added. "Be clear, not cruel. Truth doesn't need to shout." She barely slept. The next morning Mr. Dunkley met her outside his office with a clipboard and a distracted smile. He didn't ask how she was. He didn't ask if she needed support. He just said, "Some parents are concerned. Just try to keep your personal views out of class, all right?" Rena stared at him for a second longer than she should have. "I teach history. There's nothing more personal than that." He blinked, said nothing, then waved her out like she was a package delivered to the wrong address. Back in the classroom the energy felt worse. It was like the students could sense the tension in her bones, or maybe they knew what had happened and were waiting to see if she'd break. That Friday during lunch duty Brock dropped his entire tray, Sloppy Joe milk chips, right at her feet. "Oh no," he said, "my bad." He didn't bend down, didn't offer to help. He just stared, daring her to react. Rena bent slowly, picked up the tray and walked it to the trash. A few students snickered. One girl looked away, biting her lip. Back in her classroom, she wiped the corner of her eye quickly with the heel of her hand. No one would see her cry here. Not Brock, not Tanner, not the teachers who still hadn't bothered to learn her first name. That afternoon her students came in louder than usual. A few had their phones out. She caught sight of a screen. Someone had recorded the lunchroom moment and was replaying it. She didn't need sound, she knew what it showed. A teacher picking up garbage, a kid smirking. But instead of saying anything she picked up a marker. "Today," she said quietly, "we're going to talk about silent protest. About what it means when someone speaks not with noise but with presence." No one moved. "Ever heard of Claudette Colvin?" she asked. She was 15 when she refused to give up her seat. Not Rosa Parks, Claudette before her. They erased her because she was too young, too dark, too poor, but she was the first. Tanner leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Brock tapped a pen against his desk. "I want you to write down what you think courage looks like. Not what it sounds like, not what you see in movies. What it looks like when nobody's watching." A few kids scribbled. Others sat still. The bell rang and they shuffled out. Brock lingered by the door. "You really think you're changing anything here?" he muttered. Rena met his gaze. "I don't have to change everyone. Just one." He scoffed, shook his head and walked off. But Rena saw something shift. Not in him, not yet, but in one of the girls in the second row. The kind of shift that doesn't make a sound but sticks. Monday began with frost on the grass and silence in the hallways. Rena parked in her usual spot, the third one from the end, sipping coffee that had already gone lukewarm. She sat in her car for an extra minute, staring at the building like it was staring back. Then she grabbed her keys, locked her door and made her way inside. Room 208 was dark. The hallway lights buzzed overhead as she unlocked the door. Her hand froze halfway to the light switch. The smell hit her first, sour like spoiled milk. Then her eyes adjusted. Chairs were flipped over. Her desk was covered in globs of ketchup. Her "Your Voice Matters" poster was ripped in half, the edges still curling. Papers had been shredded and thrown across the room like confetti. And on the whiteboard, written in red marker, were the words, "Go back to where you came from." Rena didn't move. She stood in the middle of it all, breathing shallowly, like the air itself had turned against her. For a second she thought she might throw up. She didn't. She turned around, locked the door from the inside and sat quietly at her desk, wiping off a glob of ketchup with the corner of her sleeve. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat. Someone had used a key, that much was obvious. Her room was locked every evening. Custodial staff wouldn't have done this, and no one broke in through the windows, which meant someone let them in. She cleaned for 40 minutes before the first bell rang. She had enough paper towels and composure to make it look like nothing had happened, but she couldn't get rid of the marker on the board. It had seeped into the surface like a stain. That morning she taught with her back to it. In third period she asked her students to write about someone who had changed their community. Not a celebrity, not a politician, someone ordinary. No one said a word. Then finally the girl in the skate-or-die hoodie, Becca, raised her hand. "Hi Mom," she said. She volunteers at the food pantry every Saturday. She says sometimes helping one person is the win. Rena nodded. "That's the exact idea." Brock smirked. "So I guess the bar is pretty low these days." Tanner chuckled, not even pretending to hide it. Rena's voice didn't rise. "Doing something for someone else when there's nothing in it for you isn't a low bar. It's a choice most people avoid." Silence, then a faint cough from the back of the room. After school she sat alone in her classroom again. The board still stained, her nerves frayed, her coffee cold. She considered reporting it, but she knew what that would bring. Meetings, vague emails, maybe an apology from the principal that didn't actually say the word sorry. Instead she pulled out her phone and called her grandfather. He didn't answer. She left a voicemail. "Hey Pop, just needed to hear your voice. Something happened. Not sure what to do. I'm alright, just tired." She hung up, set her phone down and stared at the whiteboard again. Then she picked up a marker. Right beneath the red message she wrote, "I'm already home." She left it up. That evening she walked out with her head high. Not because she felt strong, but because she refused to let anyone think she was broken. The next day the writing was still there. Some kids noticed. Others didn't say a word. Brock didn't smirk that morning, neither did Tanner. But the silence was different now. Heavier, like they all knew someone had crossed a line and that Rena hadn't blinked. But she knew it couldn't stay like this. Not with the tension building, not with the message still on the board, and not with the fire starting to catch in one of her quietest students. Wednesday morning the sky hung low with clouds thick as wet cotton. Rena arrived earlier than usual. The janitor, Mr. Halverson, gave her a small nod as he passed, pushing his mop bucket down the hall. He didn't ask what had happened to her classroom, but he'd seen it. He had to. Room 208 smelled faintly of cleaning spray. Rena turned on the lights, looked at the faded red writing still clinging to the board, and then at the words she had written beneath it. "I'm already home." She stared at it for a few long seconds, then she picked up an eraser. Not to wipe away her message, but to clear the board. Because today she was going to teach something they wouldn't find in the textbook. Fourth period began like the others. Restless chairs, sluggish movement, a few students still finishing breakfast snacks. Brock and Tanner came in together, laughing at something on a phone. Rena didn't say a word. Instead she wrote two names on the board in clear block letters. Claudette Cole and Rena Kalishte, age 17. The room quieted a bit. She turned to face them. "I want to tell you a story," she said. A few kids shifted in their seats. Some looked confused, others just stared. "This is about two girls. One you may never have heard of. One you definitely haven't." He gestured to the first name. Claudette was 15 in 1955. She refused to give up her seat on a bus in Montgomery, Alabama, 9 months before Rosa Parks. But because she was young, darker-skinned, and considered too loud, they erased her story. Said she didn't look like a proper hero. No one interrupted. "Now this other name, that's mine. I was 17 back in New Orleans. There was a library in my neighborhood that had served our community for generations. It was small, not fancy, but it had everything we needed. Books, old yearbooks, job postings, a room with 4 computers." She paused. One day a notice went up. The city had rezoned the area. Developers wanted a coffee chain and a parking garage. Our library would be gone within 6 months. Brock was leaning on his elbow, but he wasn't smiling. Tanner had stopped flipping his pen. "My friend said I was wasting my time, that grown-ups didn't listen to kids. My mom was working 2 jobs and Pop said if this matters to you then go fight for it. So I did." She stepped forward. "I made flyers. Held meetings in my backyard. Talked to people at the bus stop, in line at the store. I learned how to speak at City Hall, and when the day came to vote on that zoning ordinance, I stood behind a microphone in a room full of people I didn't know and told them what that library meant to us." One student, a soft-voiced boy named Eli, raised his hand. Did it work? Rena gave a slow nod. They didn't shut it down, not right away. We bought time. And sometimes that's all you need, just a little time to get stronger. Becca, the girl in the skate-or-die hoodie, leaned forward. But you were just a kid. I still am some days, Rena said. Being young doesn't mean you can't lead, and being quiet doesn't mean you're weak. The room was still. Even Brock looked uncertain now. History is not just names and dates. It's people. People who get tired of being told to wait. People who speak up even when nobody wants to hear it. She walked to the back of the room and leaned against the bookshelf. I didn't come here to be your enemy. I came here to teach you how powerful you are. And the truth is, some of you already know it. You're just using it to tear down instead of build. Her words hung there, suspended. Tomorrow we're going to start our protest project. Each of you will choose a cause, something real, something personal. You'll research, prepare a plan of action, and tell this class what you'd do about it. And yes, it will count for a grade. The bell rang before anyone could speak. They gathered their bags in silence. No one laughed, no one rolled their eyes. As the room emptied, Becca paused at the door. Miss Calixto Brooks, she said. Your library still open? Rena smiled for the first time all week. It is. Becca nodded slowly, then walked out. But someone else had heard every word too, quiet as a shadow in the back row. Someone who hadn't spoken once all semester and who was about to surprise everyone. By Friday morning something had shifted. It wasn't dramatic. No apologies, no handwritten notes left on her desk. But Rena felt it. The way the students came in just a bit quieter. The way some of them actually looked her in the eye. Even Tanner walked in without a joke on his tongue, just a blank expression and his hood pulled low. Rena stuck to her plan. Protest project instructions were handed out, deadlines posted. Students were expected to pick a topic by Monday, submit a one-page outline by Wednesday, and present in 2 weeks. No fluff, no Googled nonsense. They groaned as she expected, but it wasn't the same kind of groaning. It was effort groaning, not disrespect. She'd take it. Choose something you actually care about, she said, passing by each desk. Not what you think will sound good. Not what your parents want to hear. Some students nodded. Others scribbled down nonsense to look busy. Then in the back a voice spoke. It was quiet, barely above a whisper. Can it be about addiction? The room shifted just slightly. It was Riley Farrow, a skinny kid with glasses too big for his face and shirts 2 sizes too large. He barely spoke, always sat in the back. Rena had noticed he never took off his hoodie even when it was hot. She also noticed the dark rings under his eyes. Absolutely, she said. You thinking something local? He nodded, then looked down as if he regretted speaking. A few students side-eyed him, but no one laughed. Make it real, she said. Just like that, the rest of the period passed in scribbles and whispers. Brock kept flipping his pencil between his fingers but didn't raise his hand once. Tanner looked like he wanted to say something the whole time but didn't. When the bell rang, most kids filtered out. Rena stayed seated, sorting through a stack of forms, when she heard someone clear their throat. It was Tanner. He hadn't left. She looked up slowly. You're really not going to quit, are you? He asked, half smiling, half something else. Rena met his gaze. No, I'm not. He scratched the side of his head and shifted on his feet. I was thinking of doing mine on veterans. My uncle came back from Afghanistan all messed up. Nobody talks about it. Rena said nothing for a second, then picked up a sticky note, scribbled something and handed it to him. That's a support group in town. They hold open meetings on Tuesdays. Go sit in on one. It might help shape your project. Tanner took the note, looked at it like it might burn. You're not like the teachers we're used to. I know, she said. He left. That night, Rena stayed later than usual. She didn't need to, but she wanted to finish a lesson plan and catch her breath in the quiet. The janitor passed by again, pushing his mop bucket. He stopped in the doorway. Heard about your board last week, he said. Kids don't always understand the damage they do. Doesn't make it okay. Rena looked up from her desk. I'm not sure they were the only ones involved. He shrugged. I've worked here 15 years. That's not hard to believe. Then he added, don't let them make you small. She smiled. I won't. He kept walking. On Monday, when Rena walked into room 208, the first thing she noticed was silence. Not the tense, heavy kind, but a focused kind. Becca was already in her seat, headphones wrapped around her neck, typing something furiously. Riley had a small stack of pamphlets in front of him about teen rehab centers in the county. Tanner had a notepad and 3 news clippings from the Columbus Dispatch. And Brock was late, but when he walked in he didn't joke, didn't smirk, he just slid into a seat and opened a blank notebook. Rena didn't say anything. She just walked to the board and wrote, "Protest doesn't have to be loud. It just has to be real." But just as the energy shifted in her classroom, something was brewing outside of it. Conversation in the teacher's lounge that would remind Rena how fragile progress can be. By Thursday the classroom had started to breathe differently. There was still chatter, still the usual foot-dragging inside conversations, but something had softened. Even Rena noticed that students lingered longer before the bell rang, asking questions that weren't about grades. Eli wanted to know if they could use music lyrics in their projects. Becca asked if protest art counted. And Riley, quiet, steady Riley, asked for help turning his bullet points into a story. She was still cautious. She knew not every shift was permanent. But she also knew change didn't shout. It moved quietly like trust. That day's topic was civil disobedience, nonviolent resistance, and how it changed the tide of major movements. As she spoke, Rena moved through the classroom slowly, her voice low but full. When they were beaten, they sat down. When they were screamed at, they stayed standing. When they were jailed, they kept marching after they were free. Nonviolence isn't passive. It's a refusal to let hate define the rules. Her eyes landed on Brock. He wasn't slouched today. He wasn't whispering or passing notes. He was looking straight at her. That caught her off guard. After the final bell, most of the students rushed out like usual, eager for lunch or their next class. But Rena noticed 2 figures hanging back, still in their seats, Brock and Tanner. She said nothing, just gathered her lesson notes, waiting. Brock finally stood. He looked awkward, less like the ringleader of a private rebellion and more like a kid unsure what to do with his own arms. Tanner looked just as uneasy. Brock spoke first. "I guess we messed up," he said, barely above a whisper. Tanner nodded slowly. "We didn't think you'd stay. Most people don't." Rena didn't blink, didn't let them off the hook. She waited. Brock looked down, scratched his jaw. "The thing on your board? That wasn't right. It wasn't just mean." Tanner added, "It was messed up." They stood there looking like they expected her to yell or worse, say nothing and walk out. But Rena stepped from behind her desk. "I'm not asking you to explain yourselves," she said gently. "But I do need to know. Do you actually care about changing, or are you just trying to clear your conscience?" Brock's eyes met hers. "I don't know yet," he said honestly. Tanner nodded again. "I just know I don't want to be that guy anymore." Rena studied them. "Start with your projects," she said. "Don't try to impress me. Tell the truth. If you do that, maybe you'll find out who you are." They both nodded. Then Brock looked at her again. "Your story? The library? That was real." "Every word," she said. They didn't say goodbye, just walked out quietly. The room felt lighter somehow. Not fixed, but lighter. Later that afternoon, Rena stepped into the copy room and found Miss Deering, 8th grade English teacher, already inside, arms crossed, eyes sharp. "You really shook things up," Deering said without looking at her. "Just doing my job," Rena replied, loading her papers into the copier. "I heard your students are standing when you walk in now." Rena smiled faintly. "They don't have to. They choose to." Deering finally turned to face her. "Some of the other teachers think you're making them feel guilty," she said flatly. Rena met her gaze. "I'm asking them to think. Maybe think a little less with feelings," Deering snapped, then softened her tone like it hadn't come out sharp. "This isn't about politics. It's middle school. This is about truth," Rena said. "And I think even middle schoolers can handle that." Deering scoffed. "Just be careful. They might love you now, but that can change fast." Rena didn't flinch. "Then I'll keep loving them anyway." She picked up her copies and walked out, her pulse steady. But as she headed back to her classroom, she didn't know that someone else had overheard the conversation. Someone who hadn't said a word to her all semester, but had just made up their mind. Friday morning arrived with a storm in the distance. Gray skies stretched low over the rooftops and wind tugged at jacket sleeves like a warning. Inside Meadow Glen, though, something else was stirring. Room 208 felt awake when Rena walked in. The students were already seated, talking yes but not aimlessly. Tanner was showing Eli how to format citations. Riley had a handout folded in his lap, lips moving as he rehearsed quietly. Even Becca was sketching something with colored pencils on a rough draft poster, her headphones hanging around her neck instead of clamped over her ears. But the biggest surprise came at 10:03. Brock was early. He walked in with a folder tucked under one arm and sat without a word. No dramatic entrance, no glance around to see who was watching. Rena didn't react. She just handed out the day's discussion prompt like it was any other day. "Who decides what's worth fighting for?" she wrote on the board. "And how do you know when it's worth the risk?" She didn't expect them to answer aloud, but hands went up. Becca said, "When the cost of staying quiet is higher than the risk of speaking up." Eli added, "When someone else is hurting and no one's paying attention." Then Brock's hand went up. No smirk, no sarcasm, just his hand. Rena paused. "Go ahead." "My sister," he said, "has Down syndrome. When she started high school, a couple of kids bullied her during gym. She didn't tell us until after the bruises showed up." The room froze. "My dad wanted to pull her out, said we'd homeschool. But she said no. She made flyers about kindness. He passed them out every morning for a month. And the weird part? It worked. People stopped messing with her." He looked around, then back at Rena. "So I guess sometimes it's worth it when you're standing up for someone who can't stand up for themselves." Rena didn't move. She didn't have to. The entire class heard him. "Thank you for that," she said softly. After class, students departed in small groups, some still discussing their projects. Rena remained behind to organize her classroom. When the door creaked open again, it was Mr. Dunkley. "Got a minute?" She nodded, gesturing to the desk opposite hers. He sat, tie askew, clipboard tucked under one arm. "Some of the parents have been inquiring about this protest project," he began, concerned it's pushing a particular narrative. Rena calmly folded her hands. "It's grounded in real history, current events, and student voices. That's not a narrative, that's education." He scratched his chin. "I'm not suggesting I disagree, but we've received a few calls." "From whom?" she prompted. He paused. "From the same families who send cupcakes with explicit distribution rules. You understand the type." She exhaled slowly. "And they're asserting what precisely?" "That it's too emotional, that you're making some children uncomfortable." "Discomfort isn't a crisis," she countered. "It's where growth begins." He leaned back. "Look, I'm not telling you to halt it. I'm simply saying maintain equilibrium." "I've been more balanced than necessary," she stated. He stood, clearly unsure how to respond, before leaving. "You have their attention, Rena," he added. "Just ensure you're guiding it somewhere constructive." She didn't reply. Later that day, the fire alarm was pulled just before last period. Another false alarm. Everyone had to evacuate. Rena stood outside in the cold with her students, the wind tugging at their sleeves. "You think it's a prank?" Eli asked. Rena nodded. "Could be, or perhaps someone's trying to avoid the work." Becca chuckled. "Then they chose the wrong day. Mine's almost finished." Behind them, Tanner and Brock stood side by side, no longer whispering, just listening. As the all-clear rang, they filed back into the building. The day was nearly over, but the impending weekend would bring more than just rest. It would bring Rena face to face with the very individuals who sought her departure, and the moment where her students would finally have to choose their stance. The school board meeting was scheduled for Saturday morning, early enough to deter a large crowd, or so they presumed. But as Rena parked behind the administrative building in downtown Mansfield, she noticed a line of cars already curving along the curb. It wasn't the number of people that caught her attention, but the palpable tension in the parking lot. Clusters of parents stood outside the entrance, arms crossed, voices hushed. She walked past them, her bag slung over her shoulder, ignoring the stares. She wasn't there for them. Inside the building, the fluorescent lights hummed. Rena took a seat in the third row. She wasn't slated to speak, but she knew what was coming. She could feel it. Mr. Dunkley had given her a vague heads-up in Friday's hallway conversation. "Don't be surprised if your name comes up." When the meeting commenced, the first 15 minutes passed uneventfully. Budget reports, maintenance requests. Then came the open comment portion. A woman stood first, tight bun, pearls, gray cardigan. She didn't state her name, but Rena recognized her. Brock's mother. I'm concerned about the tone of instruction being used in 8th grade, she began. There's been a focus on protest, race, and social agendas. My son comes home confused and uncomfortable. Another parent followed, then another. We're not saying she's a bad teacher, said one father in a windbreaker, but maybe not the right fit for our community. That word, fit, settled heavily in Rena's chest. Not unqualified, not incompetent, not even too harsh, just not the right fit. Code and not subtle. No one explicitly mentioned her name, but everyone understood the subject. Then came a pause. From the back, a voice spoke. Can students respond? Heads turned. It was Becca. She stepped forward, a folded paper in her hand, pink bangs tucked behind one ear. No fear in her voice. I'm in Miss Caliste Brooks's class. I've never cared about history before this year. I used to just fill in the blanks and get my C and move on. Some of the parents fidgeted. She made us think about who we are, not just who did what in 1776. Who we are now. What we care about. Another figure stood up. Tanner. My uncle's a vet, he said plainly, and I never talked about it in school. Nobody cared. But Miss Caliste Brooks helped me write something that actually made him cry when I showed him. Gasps came from a few corners. The room had shifted. And then Brock, late as always, walked in from the side holding a folder. I've been a jerk, he said, but that's not her fault. That's mine. The room froze. She never called me out, never tried to humiliate me. She just taught like every kid in that room mattered, even when I acted like we didn't. The board chair, a balding man in his 50s, tapped his pen on the desk. Thank you for your input, he said flatly. The moment ended, but its impact lingered. Rena didn't speak, she didn't need to. Her students had spoken for her. After the meeting in the hallway outside, she passed Brock's mom. Their eyes met. She didn't force him, Rena said calmly. That was his choice. The woman looked away, lips pressed thin. Back at school Monday morning, Miss Deering caught Rena in the copy room. Words out, she said. You've got fans now. Rena stayed quiet. Deering added, I don't agree with everything you're doing, but I'll admit you've got them engaged. That's rare. Isn't that the job? Rena asked. Deering didn't answer, she just left. Later that day, a note was slipped under Rena's door. It was on plain notebook paper scrawled in blue ink. You changed more than the classroom. Thank you for staying. It wasn't signed, but she had a feeling who it came from. But as the big day approached, the final project presentations, Rena wondered, would they still show up for each other when it mattered most, or had the moment already passed? The gymnasium didn't look like much on a normal day. Stained bleachers, scuffed floors, a stage that creaked with every step. But on Thursday afternoon something about it felt charged. Chairs were arranged in a semicircle facing the stage. A few handmade posters lined the walls, student project titles like Food Deserts in Small Towns, What It's Like to Have a Parent in Prison, and Helping Our Homeless Neighbors. No glitter, no fluff, just paper, ink, and honest effort. Rena stood near the entrance, clipboard in hand, watching students arrive with backpacks slung low and nerves etched across their faces. Most of them had dressed up in their own way. Riley wore a button-down shirt tucked into jeans. Becca had painted her nails with small fists on each finger. Eli's hoodie was replaced by a polo shirt 2 sizes too big, probably borrowed from his dad. And then Brock walked in with his sister. She clung to his hand wide-eyed, a sunflower hair clip peeking out from her curls. Brock's mom trailed behind them, stiff but present. Hey Miss Calixto Brooks, he said, not loud, just steady. This is Laurel. She wanted to come. Rena smiled. It's good to meet you, Laurel. Laurel beamed. Brock said you're the reason he stopped being annoying. Brock rolled his eyes but didn't deny it. The lights dimmed slightly and Mr. Dunkley offered a brief welcome from the stage, sticking to safe language, vague praise, and a reminder that student voices matter. Then the presentations began. Becca went first, her voice shaky but growing stronger as she talked about gender-based dress code bias and how it made girls feel like distractions. A few parents whispered. One woman took notes like she was preparing a counterargument, but no one interrupted. Then came Riley. He held up a small photo of his older brother. This is Jesse, he began. He got hooked on pills after a football injury and hasn't been home in 3 years. The room fell completely silent. I used to think if I didn't talk about him it didn't hurt. But it still does. So I want to make a zine for other kids like me so they don't feel alone. Rena watched from the sidelines, heart in her throat. Next came Tanner. He stood stiffly but read clearly, speaking about PTSD veterans and how silence doesn't heal trauma. He ended with a quote from his uncle, "Sometimes the hardest part isn't the war, it's coming back from it." Then it was Brock's turn. He stepped to the mic with a folded page and cleared his throat. "My project's about being a sibling," he started, "because sometimes you're not the one being hurt but you still feel it." He turned toward Laurel, who was swinging her legs under her chair. "When my sister got bullied, I wanted to fix it with my fists. But that's not what she needed. She needed someone to stand with her, even when no one else would." He paused. "This class taught me that protest isn't always loud. It's not always angry. Sometimes it's just not leaving." He looked at Rena. "So this is my protest, being the kind of brother she deserves." Applause came slow but sincere. Laurel clapped the loudest. At the end of the event, families lingered. Posters were reread, pamphlets passed around. A few teachers approached Rena, offering cautious compliments. Then as the gym began to empty, her grandfather walked in. Frank Kalishte stood by the doorway in his charcoal wool coat, hands tucked behind his back, eyes full of quiet pride. Rena walked over and hugged him tightly. "You stayed," he whispered. "I had to." He stepped back, looking around. "They see you now." "Maybe," she said. "More importantly, they see themselves." They sat together for a while, watching students pack up. Rena's heart was full, but her mind was still turning. But before this chapter could close, she had one more thing to say, one more truth the students needed to hear before they moved on from room 208. The Monday after the presentations, the air in room 208 felt different. Not louder or lighter, just real. As if everything they'd worked through, every argument, every moment of resistance, every cracked silence, had finally settled into something solid. There were no more stares when Rena entered, no muttering in the back row. Instead, every head lifted when she walked in. No one stood. They didn't have to anymore. Respect had taken root, and it didn't need a performance. Rena set her bag down and pulled a small box from her desk drawer. She held up a folded piece of fabric, a dark green t-shirt with white text on the front. She turned it slowly so they could read it. "Grace is louder than hate." A few students smiled. Some whispered to each other. "I had one of these made for each of you," she said. "Not because we finished the unit, but because you finally understood what it meant to care." She began handing them out one by one. No ceremony, just hands meeting fabric and students tucking them carefully into their backpacks. When she reached Brock, he took his with both hands. "Thanks," he said, no sarcasm, just gratitude. Becca asked if they could wear them on Friday. Rena shrugged with a smile. "You tell me." After the shirts were passed out, Rena returned to the front of the room and leaned against her desk. "I want to say one more thing before the semester ends," she began. The room hushed. "I know this year didn't start easy. Some of you hated this class. Some of you hated me. And that's okay." A couple of students exchanged glances. No one looked offended, they knew it was true. "But here's the thing," she continued. "You can disagree with someone. You can even dislike them. But what matters is how you treat them when no one's watching." She pointed toward the back wall where Riley's protest poster still hung, curling slightly at the edges. Real courage isn't about speaking when it's easy. It's about choosing to care when you have every excuse not to. She looked around the room, letting the silence stretch a little. "You will leave this classroom. You'll forget dates. You'll forget names. But if you remember one thing, let it be this. Never let someone else's hate make you forget your own strength." There was no applause, just stillness, and it meant more. As the bell rang, students packed up slowly. Some came up to say thank you. Others just gave a nod, a smile, a look that said, "I got it." Rena stayed behind after they left, walking to the board one last time. She picked up a marker and wrote, "The lesson isn't over. It never is." She stepped back and looked at the words, then down at the empty desks that had once felt like battlegrounds. A knock came at the door. It was Mr. Dunkley. "Got a minute?" he asked. She opened the door wider. "Sure." He stepped in, hands in pockets. "I saw the shirts. They liked them." He nodded. "Got a call this morning from the district office. They want you to lead a pilot program on civic engagement next year." Rena raised an eyebrow. Me. Apparently, someone from the board shared your students' projects with them. They were impressed. Rena smiled slowly. That's unexpected. Good work doesn't always stay invisible, he said, then paused. You made something real here, Miss Calishte Brooks. Even the parents who complained, they stopped calling. He turned to leave but added, You staying next year? Rena looked around the room. Yeah, she said. I think I will. That evening back at home she called her grandfather. He answered on the first ring this time. Still standing, he asked. Still standing, she said. And I think they're standing with me now. Frank chuckled. Told you. Grace doesn't back down. Rena looked out her window at the street below, the soft glow of porch lights flickering on in the distance. They learned something this year, she said. Not just from the books. From the fight. From each other. You taught them how to see, he replied. Not everyone can do that. They sat in silence for a moment, both letting it settle. Then he said, So what's next? Rena leaned back in her chair, smiling. Whatever they're ready for. If you believe stories like this matter, if you've ever been underestimated, ignored, or tested, don't keep quiet about it. Share your voice. Teach someone else. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button because we're just getting started.